Did you guys hear about Steph Curry ending his 12-year business relationship with Under Armour? I finally got some much needed sleep, and this is what I wake up to? I wish I could have posted this reaction a little bit earlier, because this is big news for Steph Curry. The Curry brand is officially a free agent, and we'll see what happens with that over time. And I really do wonder what happened, because Steph Curry is loyal to a fault. This guy, when he commits to somebody, you rarely ever see him give up on those people. And I wonder if he would rejoin with Nike to kind of rebrand himself, because I think that would be the path to change everything in terms of his reputation, legacy, all these things. Let me explain. But before I do, if you like the content so far, be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and that like button so that this video gets out to all the basketball fans out there. Steph Curry was originally with Nike. When it was time for him to sign a new deal, Nike messed up. Nike didn't treat Steph Curry the way he needed to be treated. They got together in a meeting Nico Harrison was involved in, by the way. And word is that they were basically treating Steph Curry like another schmo and not like somebody that Nike highly valued. As a matter of fact, during the presentation, they showed a photo of Kevin Durant while trying to pitch to Steph Curry that he should remain with Nike. So Steph had a word with his dad, Del Curry, and Del Curry essentially advised Steph Curry, go with the company that gives you the valuation that you deserve. And Under Armour did exactly that, treating Steph Curry like a king. Under Armour was basically like an ant compared to a powerhouse like Nike. But Steph Curry decided to go with the company that was most loyal to him, and he went with Under Armour. And that turned out to be very problematic for Steph Curry's career. Because let's just think about this logically from a business perspective. Nike essentially owns the sports world. They are the official partner of the NBA. If you want to wear basketball shoes, Nike is essentially the go-to brand. Of course, they have their share of competition, but all those competitive companies are no match for Nike because Nike holds the best players on the planet. Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Giannis, KD, all these guys are with Nike. Nike represents the very best in the world. And that drives everything about them. If they didn't have Michael Jordan, would they be the best shoe company in the world? Probably not, because people flock to the best. They want to be like the best. They're going to wear the same things that the best wears. That's how it goes. And here's the problem. 14 and 15, Steph Curry takes over the league, absolutely dominates, and runs LeBron James out of there in the finals, and he wins his first title against LeBron James and becomes the best player in the world. And a funny thing happened in that finals, where Steph Curry averaged 26, 5, and 5, and the voters somehow determined that the finals MVP should either be LeBron James, the loser in the series, who couldn't even get it to a game 7. Listen, if you're going to be finals MVP as a losing player, bare minimum, you have pushed the other team to the absolute brink and you are bringing them to a game 7. If you can't even bring the series to a game 7, how are you going to crown that player as the MVP, especially when the guy is shooting close to sub 40% from the field? And most importantly, you don't reward losers. You don't give somebody an award for losing something, no matter how good they ended up being. That is literally the opposite of the world that we have been living in for all of time. You do not reward losing. That should be the end of story. And yet, some voters actually voted for LeBron James for Finals MVP. And more importantly, a bunch of voters decided to give the Finals MVP award to Andre Iguodala. That is the equivalent of giving the MVP to Scottie Pippen instead of Michael Jordan. That is the equivalent of giving the Finals MVP to a Pau Gasol instead of Kobe Bryant. Absolutely preposterous. The Warriors are nothing if they don't have Steph Curry. Andre Iguodala doesn't perform the way he does offensively if it's not for Steph Curry. Even though Steph Curry averaged 10 more points than Iguodala did, and all the focus and attention of the Cavaliers was on Steph Curry, the voters somehow decided that Andre Iguodala was the reason the Warriors won the series because he did such a great job on LeBron James, while some of the voters thought that LeBron James was so good that he should have won the Finals MVP. Make up your mind here. Either Andre Iguodala did so well against LeBron James that LeBron James had a horrible series, or LeBron James was so good that he deserves to win the Finals MVP even though he lost the series. Make up your mind. Neither narrative makes any sense. Somehow the voters decided, Steph Curry had a poor game against Matthew Dellavedova, and that disqualifies him from winning finals MVP, as if star players in the finals never has any struggling games at any point. Do you know what's actually difficult to do? Run into adversity against a team in the finals, in the playoffs in general, and then being able to overcome it, and ultimately bringing your team to the promised land. Steph Curry initially struggled against the roughhousing of Matthew Dellavedova, so the Warriors were down 1-2, and if Steph Curry doesn't figure things out, then they'll lose to the Cavaliers, and yet he did figure it out. The Warriors dominated the Cavs on the road in the following game. Steph Curry had a bounce-back game, and they tied the series, and then they go back home where Steph Curry drops 37 points on Matthew Dellavedova's head. So they take that pivotal game, and then they take care of business on the road and win the NBA Finals. Steph Curry scored 10 more points than the next best scorer on the team. Steph Curry won the finals with Andre Iguodala being his second best player, averaging 16 points per game. And that's only because the defense left him wide open pretty much all the time. While again, Steph Curry is drawing all the attention, 2-3 bodies on him all the time. Klay Thompson, who's getting single coverage, is crapping the bed, averaging 16 points barely on 40% from the field and 30% from the three-point line. Steph Curry really is not getting a whole lot of offensive help here. He is carrying the team offensively. He is the single driving engine for their offense. So for Steph Curry to not win Finals MVP is a huge hit to his legacy from the jump. And you can't possibly think that there's no shady business going on there for all the voters to completely avoid voting for Steph Curry, which is the obvious thing to do. And while I can't prove that Nike was involved, but you can't help but think that those voters were somehow influenced into making sure that they vote for anyone but Steph Curry and come up with whatever reason. Even if that reason is as comically weak as having one bad game in a 7-game series. Game 2 of the finals that year was the only time Steph Curry shot under 40% from the field. I want you to take a look at the field goal percentage of Kobe Bryant the last time he won an NBA Finals and got Finals MVP. Again, Steph Curry did the impossible. He was the smallest player on the floor as a star of a team. A 6'3" point guard is the best player on the team and just led his team to a championship for the first time in 40 years. And he got jobbed, completely jobbed. And call me crazy, but if Steph Curry signed with Nike instead of Under Armour, something tells me that he would have won that Finals MVP. You have to understand something if you are Nike and you're in the business and you're worth practically $100 billion. Think about the valuation of Under Armour and Nike right now. Under Armour is worth less than $2 billion, crazy enough. Nike is worth just under $100 billion. That is how much is at stake if you're Nike and you have a player like Steph Curry who's suddenly better than LeBron James. He just beat him in the finals. He's better than every athlete in the world, and that is not good for business. Oh, and by the way, Steph Curry ended up shooting 44, 39, and 89 in the finals. And yeah, LeBron put up more stats and numbers, but look at his efficiency. It is absolutely disgusting. And he took 13 shots more than Steph Curry did in the finals. Of course his stats are gonna be inflated. You goofies, Zach Lowe and Jeff Van Gundy, who voted for LeBron James. You guys call yourself basketball minds, and it's absolutely pathetic. You voted for an inefficient loser for the Finals MVP. You guys are losers. The main player of the team that won the finals averaged 26, 5 rebounds, 6 assists, 1.8 steals as the second best on the team. So he led the team in points, assists, and almost in steals as well. Shot 44, 39, and 89 and didn't win the Finals MVP. This is the only time in NBA history where such a thing happened, where a player puts up these kinds of stats and ended up not winning Finals MVP. Has never happened. Comparatively, Kobe Bryant in his last finals, look at his efficiency for the series. It is atrocious. He had not one, but 2 games where he shot sub 40% from the field, including 6 of 24 in the final game. He got bailed out of that series. But did you see the voters pondering about, maybe we should give it to Pau Gasol, who was having a double-double and shooting 50% from the field. Oh, Kobe Bryant struggled in a few games. I think we need to give this Finals MVP or consider it for Pau Gasol. No, you didn't see that goofiness, and you'd never seen that goofiness ever in NBA history, really. But enough about the Finals MVP snub. The following season comes and Steph Curry is Unanimous. He is the greatest basketball player on the planet. It's not even close. LeBron James' time had come and gone. It was Steph Curry, and he was synonymous with Michael Jordan. Literally, players around the league were whispering, oh, this is Michael Jordan stuff right here. Kevin Garnett is talking about it. Kenny Smith is talking about it. These guys are comparing Steph Curry to the immortal, the guy that you never compare to anybody. They're comparing Steph Curry to Michael Jordan. And that is very dangerous for Nike, because obviously Michael Jordan is the GOAT. But if a player that is not with Nike is suddenly challenging Michael Jordan and is reaching his status and is actually comparable to a Michael Jordan, that's what was happening that season. That is a major problem for Nike. For another company other than Nike to hold, obviously, the best player in the world. And let me just say, Under Armour was absolutely awful, did not take advantage of the fact that they had the best athlete in the world at the time. The marketing for Steph Curry has been absolutely atrocious and abysmal over the years. And after all that they went through together, it's really not that surprising that Steph Curry decided to call things off with that company. And it is refreshing to see Steph Curry actually do something other than just being kind and letting people do whatever they want because he's a nice guy. Sometimes, and at some point, you have to put your foot down when there's some kind of injustice going on. I really wish you would do some of that behind the scenes with Steve Kerr. But anyway, in the 15-16 year, the Warriors are in the finals, but Steph Curry is not himself because he hurt his knee in the first round against the Rockets and came back too early. And he was clearly and obviously a limited version of himself. His MCL wasn't right. The Cavaliers were roughing him up with two bodies every time, and it was very difficult to navigate through all that. And at the same time, LeBron James is somehow talking to the front office about how Draymond should be suspended for this play. You guys all know this infamous play. The idea that you're going to suspend somebody over this for an NBA Finals game is absolutely preposterous. You cannot do that for the spirit of competition. Draymond didn't actually hurt anybody here. At worst, it was an unfavorable gesture. How soft can you get that the NBA would decide to suspend him for this? A flagrant foul was assessed for this. A flagrant foul? Did LeBron James get hurt on this play, let alone injured? I mean, there's clearly an agenda and manipulation going on here. And again, you have to consider Nike's relationship with the NBA compared to Under Armour's relationship with the NBA. Was there even one to consider? You cannot tell me that there isn't some level of favoritism going on here. So you know what happened from there. The Warriors go into Game 6 with no Draymond Green. Next thing you know, Andrew Bogut ends up getting injured in that game. And Andrew Bogut was a vital part of the success for the Warriors in that series. And if Draymond Green was playing in that game, then the whole sequence of events is completely different, and the likelihood of Andrew Bogut getting hurt is not there. So a cascade of events happened, and ultimately the Warriors, you know what happened, ended up losing Game 7. And then from there on, all the narratives about Steph Curry changes. The way the media talks about Steph Curry is just negative, negative, negative. You have these Clutch/Nike agents working for the media on ESPN and all these other platforms. You got some idiot on ESPN talking about how he would rather have Andre Iguodala shoot the final shot of a game with the fate of the universe on the line over Steph Curry. You see these clowns covering the game of basketball, and they don't have Steph Curry in their top 10 list of point guards. You see Steph Curry in the NBA getting screwed out of foul after foul after foul. And the refs are persistently calling things against the Warriors and manipulating the games against the Warriors with the refs. I mean, if you think about the way the NBA and the refs have been calling things against Steph Curry and the Warriors over the last 5 years, if you've been properly paying attention, then you know what's been going on. Now, is that due to the NBA's relationship with Nike, and do they have something going on behind the scenes? Obviously, there's no way to prove that, but theoretically, if you think about it, there's something there. Just think about it. And now, ultimately, the widespread narrative about Steph Curry is that he's the greatest shooter of all time. And they box him into this category of being the greatest one-trick pony in the world. Because guess what? You can't label Steph Curry as the greatest shooter of all time because shooting is only one aspect of the game of basketball. What about everything else that entails the game? The physicality of it, the size of it, the ball handling, all the other skills involved, the rebounding, the screening, everything else you do inside of the arc, inside the paint area, etc. There's so much more to the game of basketball than just shooting. And Steph Curry is one of the most complete basketball players you've ever seen in your life, especially at his size and weight. People have questions about where he stands in the all-time list of basketball players, but pound for pound, he is the greatest basketball player you've ever seen. A one-trick pony doesn't win 4 NBA championships as the best player of that team. And a one-trick pony isn't in discussions to be a top 10 player of all time and in conversations to get into a top 5 player of all time. And yet, that is the reality of who Steph Curry is. But the true greatness of who he is getting diminished by the senseless narratives that have been going on in the media. And you have to wonder, just like with NBA and Nike, does Nike also have a relationship with some of these media companies like ESPN, for example? The answer is yes. So if Nike is a source of finance for ESPN, and let's say, for example, Nike wants certain narratives out there, would that influence ESPN? Would that influence the business heads at the top that would direct the employees of ESPN and telling them how to narrate certain things? Does that make sense to you? If that makes sense to you, now think if Steph Curry was with Nike the whole time, would Nike have any reason to have Steph Curry talked about in a negative light? No. Why would they? Steph Curry is a Nike athlete. They would actually do everything possible to suppress anything negative about Steph Curry, if anything, and try to speak in a way where it completely elevates his status as another Nike athlete who is just one of the tops in the world. And at that point, if he ends up being even better than LeBron James, does that actually and really matter to Nike? No, because they're both under Nike anyway. Competition for its own athletes is not a bad thing for Nike. So the way I see it at the end of the day, if Steph Curry ended up signing with Nike instead of useless Under Armour, who's done nothing with the fact that they had the greatest basketball player in the world with them all this time, boy, how different would the narrative for Steph Curry be? And this is all important. This is all important because the driving narrative of the NBA is finding out who is that best player, who is that greatest player, who are the greatest of all time, the legacies. What are these guys playing for? And where do they stand in the all-time ranks? Those are the main driving narratives and the conversations of the NBA. So, in all likelihood, Steph Curry would have won that Finals MVP like he should have if he was with Nike. And he'd probably be getting a completely different type of whistle in the NBA if he was with Nike. And I want you to understand something about Steph Curry. It's very specific to Steph Curry. There are other players in the league that are not with Nike, and you wonder like, oh, what about this guy and that guy? They don't have the same treatment from the refs as the way Steph Curry does and all these things. You have to understand that those players are not even in the same stratosphere as some of the best players in the world. They're not touching a LeBron James, and they're certainly not touching a Michael Jordan. And as long as they're not of that caliber, they can actually use those athletes as a reason, as an example, as to, oh, there's no manipulation going on here. You can see this player is getting this player is getting that. No. This is specifically pertaining to Steph Curry because he is the only one on the planet that has been good enough to be better than LeBron James and is challenging Michael Jordan in many ways and aspects, which again is completely distorted by the narration of the media talking about Steph Curry as just a shooter, so he'll never even reach the status of a Kawhi Leonard, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Kevin Durant, all these things. Oh, he's too small, he doesn't have the physicality, he's not in the same tier of players. Everybody who knows basketball knows that Steph Curry is better than those guys. It's not even close. Look at the all-time standings and the ranks of where these players are. There's a reason Steph Curry is in the top 10 conversations and a guy like Kevin Durant is not, even though he won 2 Finals MVP over Steph Curry. Yes, I am very tempted to believe that history would have been altered so much more if Steph Curry was with Nike instead. I think he'd have 5 championships by now. I don't think they would have been screwed out of their second title in 15 and 16 if Steph Curry was with Nike. Again, these are not necessarily facts, but they're theories. You just have to think for yourself whether that theory makes sense or not. Having said that, let's see where Steph Curry ends up. Let's see if he partners with a different company. And let's see if that somehow ends up being Nike. Because if it does end up being Nike, Gee, I wonder where the narrative is going to go from there. If he ends up being with Nike moving forward and for the rest of his life, and Curry brand is going to live long after Steph Curry retires, then maybe the narratives on who Steph Curry is can finally be corrected, and that media influence on the general public, that actually is the engine that makes people, generally, the general public, think the way they do about things. And then before you know it, more people in the media will start coming out talking about, you know what, we have been making a mistake talking about Steph Curry as the greatest shooter of all time. This is an injustice and is discrediting everything about Steph Curry as a basketball player. And the more people start saying things like that, the more the overall sentiment starts to change. People are like, oh, okay, no, we should stop calling him the greatest shooter of all time. We should just start calling him one of the greatest basketball players of all time. Do you see the level of difference in those two labels? Steph Curry did not mean to get into a war with Nike, but that's exactly what ended up happening because of how great he became. This is probably something that even Steph Curry did not expect, and is certainly something that Nike did not expect. These two should have been partnered all along and working in conjunction with each other, and we would literally be living in a different world right now. Let's see what happens and what develops of this situation moving forward. If I missed anything in regards to or in relation to the NBA, Nike, media, Steph Curry, and how those relationships influences what happens. If I missed anything, be sure to leave them down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back very soon for the post-game breakdown between the Warriors and the Spurs. And as always, Steph Curry is the GOAT.